the cloud.
Awesome.
And we're starting. Welcome, everybody. Most of you guys in the call know me. I'm Rob Kalman. I own Michigan Technology Services out in Farmington Hills. A lot of you have taken the Scrum or Agile courses with us, a lot of Agile leadership workshops. Scott, Dunn, and I have been working together for quite a while, and he's part of the Agile Leadership Journey community, and he has Rocket 9 Solutions out of Nashville. He teaches our Agile leadership courses and our Advanced Scrum courses, along with a few other people. And we're going to talk today about the newer of the Agile Leadership certifications from Scrum Alliance, Agile Leadership for Teams, CAL Teams. It's been out a little while, but we're just starting to bring it out. I think most of you are familiar with the CAL 1, which got rebranded as a CAL E and CAL O. I'll let Scott introduce himself. And the game plan is what we usually do. It's about 40 minutes or so of a presentation, and some time for questions and answers at the end. We usually time box it in around an hour. We'll go a little longer if you have a lot of questions. Scott, it's up to you. If you want to take questions as we go, we can spread out the presentation, or we can save them for the end. You just let me know. If you guys have questions, you can use the app and so raise your hand, and or even use the chat function and let me know, and we'll call out. So we have some sort of order to this whole thing. If you have any questions at all, you know how to reach me, and we'll talk. Scott, I'm going to let you run with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And just on that personal note, I appreciate working with Rob because he's one of the few folks out there that's engaging with all these businesses who understands really the bigger picture of Agile and what's involved in these transformations and, you know, the efforts, the touches, the long game of a lot of this stuff. So it's nice when someone's not simply saying, hey, we just need to get someone for training. There's so much more than that. So we're going to touch on a bit of that. So hopefully, based on the slide, this is what you are here for. And we're going to take one step back. There's a little bit about me, Agile coach and trainer, but really at the enterprise level, just trying to help the organizations top down and bottoms up, try to help them, you know, attain the value that they think Agile is supposed to give them, whatever that is, help them discover that. Make sure we're in alignment with leadership down to the team level, down to the technical practices level, et cetera. I founded Rocket 9 5-6 years ago as a part of that vision of coaches and trainers at those different levels working there. I'm an Agile Leadership Journey guide. Agile Leadership Journey is a collection of guides worldwide using a lot of the same core content. We'll see a little glimpse of that if you're not familiar with that. My background, I've been in Agile for a while. I'm a certified enterprise coach, certified Scrum trainer as well, and in prior roles in management, project management, development. So there's for the most part, I feel your pain. Like, I understand the challenges we're facing. I've been there on the delivery side. I've been there, working late, coming on the weekends, pulling all-nighters, whatever it took, it seemed like, to try to just get something out the door. It's what the customer would want. And that's just fraught with all sorts of challenges. And I felt like we weren't ever figuring that out until we came across Agile, and that seemed to solve a lot of those problems. So that's a little bit about me. For those who aren't aware, just a quick glimpse of what we're talking about with this aspect of the Agile Leadership Journey, or certified Agile leadership as it is from the Scrum Alliance, is this idea that we hit a ceiling, and that ceiling is what the organization can handle in terms of change, their buy-in and support, where management and leadership is at, how they show up. And lots of times, what you might have already seen this is that they kind of see Agile as an IT thing. Yeah, you devs, QA, go, scrum it up, or whatever that thing is you do, and just let us know when you're done. Because supposedly this Agile thing gives us amazing results. We'll see you in 6 months, right? And somehow they think it's magically, and you're immediately thinking, we need your help, we need your support, et cetera. So we do dig into that in a bit, but if you're not already aware, that's the ceiling that we're trying to address with what's coming from the certified Agile leadership classes across those. So part of that is what we don't want to do, and this is the most common approach, is we just push in with a process. We say, oh, we're going to use SAFe, or oh, we're going to use the Spotify model, right? And we just jump right to solution. We completely miss why are we going Agile? Why is it coming evening to change? I thought everything's working just fine. What do you mean this isn't, we're Fortune 500. How can you say this isn't working for us, et cetera? So we're trying to jam that in. But if your culture doesn't change, you probably heard culture eats strategy for breakfast. If the strategy was that Agile is going to give us great results, the culture will beat it up and kick it right back out the door, right? If we haven't fundamentally changed the culture. So we don't want to try to jam it in from the outside. We'd like to find a way to shift the culture internally, that you and your teams and leadership find ways of working that help them hit those goals. So Agile as a means to those ends. So one, we recognize we need to change and we see how we need to change, and it's in alignment with our leadership. So it gets us results. It is the new way of working that we know we need to adopt. So it sticks, long after the consultants or whoever leaves, right? We've legitimately changed. You could quickly ask yourself, is the way that we're working now going to get us the goals that leadership wants? And even better to ask them that, hey, the way we're doing things now, is that going to get those, those new goals you had? And they're probably going to say, no, it's not. So how do we do that? So what we're looking at is a set of learnings and patterns and practices to try to give you guys those tools. What are they exactly? I don't know. Everyone's situation differs. So all we do is kind of go through that and try to give you the ideas and insights to say, I think I know how we need to do this. Jim Collins says it's the difference between being a time teller or making people clock builders. We want your people to be clock builders, so they don't have to keep going to expert so-and-so to get the answer, which you already know may or may not fit. Just because it worked somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to work in your company. So change from the inside out in culture. So one nice way of doing that is looking across what the Scrum Alliance has put out in terms of the certified Agile leadership trainings. They did, refactor it, as Rob mentioned. So it's now separate one-day classes, and we see them kind of patterned, these different ways. They're usually paired up. The ones on the far left are what Rob's already mentioned. What used to just be CAL is now CAL Essentials, Certified Agile Leadership Essentials, which is a one-day class just really on leadership development for this new paradigm that we're working in of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. The way we were doing management in the past just isn't sufficient for the challenges we're facing in today's marketplace. The blue one, Cal O, that's Certified Agile Leadership for Organizations. That really is about how do we lead change, right? Agile really is just another change management approach. How do you at the management level, how do we support leaders to lead that change? And humans, we just don't really love change that much. So how can we make that a successful process in general? In the middle, you see how we've paired the CAL-T either with Leadership Essentials, or maybe some people have taken all three of them, because teams is really about how do you develop high-performing teams? How do you develop high-performing team members? We'll walk through that in just a moment. But at some level, you could say, how do I help my Scrum Masters grow in leadership ability? Sometimes they're just kind of thrust into this Scrum Master role, but we already know the Scrum Master is a servant leader. So there's an aspect of leadership to that, isn't there? Certainly product owner has an aspect of leadership. They're leading the team in terms of what we're building. And that way of prioritization, right? Trying to do things differently than just loudest voice wins or highest paid person's opinion. That's a new way of prioritization that they work with leadership. So that's a leadership aspect. And certainly management. Anyone in mid-management or leadership, right? That's an aspect of growing that leadership. So we pair it with teams at the team level, or maybe you look at all three. Let's just walk through a couple of notes on that. What is it specifically we're looking at in teams, just that one day? It's about how to develop high-performing teams. There's lots of good data research out there from Google, from other trusted sources. What does that look like? What's the recipe for that? We walk through that. How to develop team members. Again, great research and studies over many, many years. What's the biggest leverage you have to develop people, to get them engaged, to get their buy-in and support? There's a lot to that, and we spend time on that. And then one of the areas I really like a lot that I feel is kind of new, and for some of it's learning how to thread the needle, and that is, what are the team practices? Let's just take knowledge sharing, for example. Some of you have been in places before where there's some key player on the team, but because of the expert, they're needed like everywhere, and you're sitting there thinking, man, if only we could clone Sarah, or if only we could clone Bob, whatever that is, right? That's a good example of, we have to find a way to do knowledge sharing, and there's great patterns to do it, not aside from the teams, but as a way of doing the work, that we cross-pollinate and share that knowledge, so we don't have that critical path dependency on one key player. Same thing for alignment. What practices are we doing that moves us that way? Because if we look at, hey, these teams are going agile, what should they do? There's like a bazillion different things they could do that are agile things. but sometimes they feel like they're pulling us in opposite directions. Maybe business is saying we need to get results faster, but you're like, no, Agile is about everyone in the room sharing and holding hands and getting naked and singing Kumbaya. Like that doesn't seem like that's getting us results, right? But maybe you do need more collaboration. We're not listening to voices. I don't know, but you can't go in all directions or else you're really netting nothing. So what practices are in alignment with what the business wants? What practices are a good fit for your culture? That actually makes sense instead of getting, freaking people out and getting kicked out as well, and move us in the direction we need to go. So I think those are at the team level, there's things we can do that can address your pain points if only you knew what they were, right? So we kind of walk through a lot of those practices are, and we take a quick glance at scaling models. So I've just seen too many like, this is the best scaling approach, this is the thing to use, but I don't see very many compare and contrast, and I yet have ever seen this scaling model works great for this culture. Because if it doesn't fit your culture, I'll go back to what we were just talking about earlier. Your culture will eat that up. As a client this year said, the consultants that brought in, scaling approach X were, quote, beat to death and kicked out. I don't think that's a positive thing, right? So we got to make sure it fits for your company's culture and where you guys need to go. And all of them have their different strengths and weaknesses. What we want is for you guys in that class to have the insight, like, I know what one works for my company's culture. I have a way of identifying that. I know the trade-offs, nothing's perfect, but here's the best fit given our circumstances and our organization's goals. Now you're making an informed decision in alignment with leadership and what they expect to get with Agile. That's a win, right? Right now, what we're doing is a whole lot of copy without knowledge. Well, that worked at such and such company. And you don't really know what was going on in that company, what they're trying to get from it or whatever. So that's really what we're after, I think, is kind of leveling everyone up at the teams level, both the individuals and the teams and teams of teams level, so that they have really great tools and working in alignment. So we'll take a glance at what's in the class and kind of walk through a couple of exercises so you get an idea like, well, what does that really look like? Any questions so far from that? Well, you guys are an easy crowd. Okay, then fine. We're going to move on. I hope that keeps up because this will go really fast then. I'm going to shift over and I have a poll question for you guys. I'm going to put it in chat. And here we go. And I'm going to pull up the results and let's take a look at what you guys think of that question. I'm going to change my screen so we can all watch it together. Here we go. In your experience, what are the problems the Agile teams are facing? So I think you get 4 choices in case you have more than 1 or 2 problems. I don't know what keeps you guys up at night, but I can guess. Let's give you guys some time. Click on that link. It should let you type in a number of options if you want. Type in whatever you'd like. Here you go. Yes, culture for sure. Interesting. Fast results. Is it the pressure for fast results? Whoever put that in? I'm curious about that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if they would ease up?
Expect a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're changing the engine on the plane, but don't be late to the next destination. Like that's hard to do. Yeah. And I have yet to see that. Well, there's been a couple exceptions, but for the most part, they're like, well, no, you can't slow down. Great. So scaling managers, well, you guys have a lot of problems. Okay, this is good. Leadership support. Imbalance. What can I hear about the imbalance real quick? What's that about?
It's an imbalance of talents. We kind of, you have the right talents in the team for a while, and then you end up with a shortage of the people you really need.
Right.
Because they all went over to some other team.
Yeah, and you mean specifically, Bert, technical skills, what they know, their knowledge?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and the problem is, I mean, how many of you, just by show of hands, how many of you have been in like in the project space or program level space? Every time we're trying to do like resource allocation, resource smoothing, oh my gosh, it was a nightmare, right? Because and it's always fluid and always changing. So as soon as you get dialed in, it changes the next week or 2. And it's just, and here we go. Like I need 10% of a Java developer, right? Like I need his arm. So I think what we could do is solve the root cause of like how did those people weren't born knowing that stuff. They learned it some way. Can we tap into that for our own competitive advantage in the way that we work? So we're always dynamically reallocating and relearning. So, because what I don't need is for you guys to keep solving that problem over and over and over again. Let's be honest, how much of a value add is that really? So that's I think a different way we could look at it. I've seen great results with. It's not a magic wand. It's not like I wave this and then tomorrow your problems are gone. But in a short order, 2 to 3 sprints, I think you see results that like, okay, that's good. All right, I see a couple hands up. We can take those questions real quick. Is it Amarpreet?
Yeah, I was replying your question about managing projects. That's what I was replying.
That you're okay. Yeah, okay. So you're one of us.
Sorry.
Great. No, don't worry. Thanks for the virtual show of hands. Is that the same for you, Menjendir?
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, you guys know how to do the raise hand feature. All right. Well, we see a lot of items here. I'm going to double check if there's anything else. Yeah, maturity level, collaboration, fear of change for sure. Now, there's certainly a number of these, like the one that Bert had mentioned about that are definitely team level. Some of these, let's say leadership support, a culture, obviously culture. Some would call it a culture of accountability. Some of these are going to be, I'm going to take one step back from that slide deck. Some of these challenges I think are better addressed in like certified agile leadership organizations. That's how you lead change. And that's where we camp out a lot on culture. Teams, we kind of pick up and say, assuming that you know what that looks like, here's what you can do to kind of reinforce and support and get behind that. So some of these might be in other classes. Yeah, Agile only in IT. That's another good example. It's localized. Good. Okay. Great stuff. Thanks for doing that. Let's take a look then at what's actually in the class. I'm going to do a very fast overview, but here's why. It might be like, I'm not following all that stuff. I hate you. Hopefully you don't say that. But as we kind of go through it, here's what I do want. I want you at least at the 30,000 foot view. Like I see the topic areas of the class at a glance, right? And then we're going to come back though and spend the time on a couple of them that I think are like stand out as more critical or important, or the feedback that we get. So we will come back and look at a few and spend some time on those. Groovy? Okay. I don't know if people say groovy anymore. Probably not. Okay, so I'm going to pick up, let's just say, like I said, sometimes this is paired with the leadership essentials, like just growing as a leader, what we'd say agile, leadership agility, being a catalyst leader. And some of this is touching on what's in the Cal O for some overlap. So we start off with, just to be clear, I'm going to zoom in, make sure everyone can see this really well. We start off making sure that the groundwork is laid, that everyone understands there is a compelling need to change based on what's happening in the marketplace today. We are at this incredible inflection point of the pace of change, connected devices, instant collaboration with anyone worldwide, knowledge as a commodity. People leave and take that knowledge with them. So the pace of change has changed. And the management style we might have used 10, 20 years back, which was based on management styles of 20, 30, 40 years back, which is much more like a manufacturing command and control approach, isn't sufficient for what we need from thought workers. Creativity, or what I call creative abrasion. You have to get the right people in the room and kind of talk it out. But that's a different style of trying to work with teams and team accountability. But we present the case for that there's a compelling reason for change. We talk about cross-functional teams. This one, unfortunately, I really wish this would be like, no, obviously we're doing cross-functional teams and we do slices of our work that you can demo every single sprint. But just in case some people aren't there, we walk through why that does not work, that you'd have a database team and a front-end team, and the way Scrum works in particular, that's not going to work well. This is one we're going to come back to in a moment, talk about leadership behaviors, or what we call the 3 levels of leadership. So we'll come back to that and the type of leadership that works best in an agile space. This is one we do spend a lot of time on, not just in this class, but in the organizations class. And that is a simple grid coming from University of Michigan, actually, Michigan, competing values framework. And what we're talking about here is like, what is culture and what's your company's culture, and a way to easily find that out. But in this case, what we do at the teams level is we look at team level practices. And we'll come back to this one a little bit as well. But at a glance, I would ask, if we're trying to support our teams, or if you're on a team and you're really trying to raise your level up, I would just challenge you. I think these are all patterns that you would, or tools that you at least know what those are. And preferably, I know what kind of problems they're good at solving. Right? Not all things for all situations, but we do workshop that as well to make sure we're working in line with the culture. There's some items we spend time just on high performing teams, as I mentioned at a glance. There's not too much in here, but also employee engagement. And I said the studies that kind of back up some of that, servant leadership a little bit, team accountability, not individual accountability, and how we need to shift that conversation with management. And then helping people grow, looking at core questions that are asked about proven ways that people know that your team members are engaged with the work. And actually less than 2 out of 10 are engaged with the work at your company. A lot of them just show up statistically. So what can you do about that? And we draw on, these are tools coming from the Certified Agile Leadership Essentials, but we review them here. What's meaningful for people, and how do you have what we call catalyst conversations, where I don't need to solve your problem. I'm here to help you solve your problem. They're the one with the problem. They're the one closest to the work, and we want them to own it. So they need to come up with a solution. So we kind of walk through, what does that look like? And then we round out the first half of the session reviewing, this is interesting, research from Google on their most high performing teams. They surveyed hundreds of teams. This is what they found out were the top 5 factors for separating the high performing teams from the others. We're all familiar with psychological safety, but the other ones are very interesting as well. How do we cultivate meaning and impact in the work that we're doing? How can we help them in terms of dependability, or you could say accountability, structure, clarity, and do a little compare and contrast with what some of you might be familiar with, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And there's definitely a lot of overlap. So how do we reinforce the stronger points? Psychological safety is very similar to having an absence of trust. What do we do about that? And we do some solutioning around that. What did Google find was helpful? And then what are proven tools to help us in terms of those dysfunctions of a team? That's the first half. And then the second half, I'll pull this up. One I like a lot is looking again, what are the top problems over the last decade of why does Agile fail, to go further? If you look through these, as we do in the class, most of the top 10 are all management and culture related. So the reason we're not doing Agile better here at our company isn't that your daily stand-up takes longer than 15 minutes. That is not the issue, right? The issue is management and culture. So based on that, how can we, what approach can we take that's aligned and respectful of culture? And we go through a number of patterns. We're actually offloading some of this content so people can dig in a little bit more to have at a glance an idea of what are these popular frameworks about? You've probably heard of the Scaled Agile Framework or Scrum at Scale, Large Scale Scrum, Path to Agility, Spotify. If not, in the class you'd find out, but there's a training coming up on Path to Agility. You can find out that there are others out there as well. What I'm interested isn't that you're an expert in these models. That would be way too much in any of those classes, or 1, 2, 3, 4 days each. Well, I'm interested in that you have an idea, I see what the pros and cons are. I see what culture that fits in. I understand why SAFe is so popular with government. And I see why Spotify was good for innovation at a startup called Spotify, right? But you would understand why, not that one's better than the other. It depends, right? So that's what we kind of walk through on the scaling models. And then we look at one I think is really helpful in terms of what problems are you facing? You might be suffering from some of these. Do you have challenges right now in your life with prioritization across teams, coordination across those teams? How about balancing work across the teams? What about problem solving, sharing lessons learned? Do you feel like everyone's sharing that knowledge across the teams, et cetera? If not, what are some practices you could use right now that would help address those? And so we walk through, here's some great patterns, and you're going to do the matching up of hey, I think that would help us in terms of coordination or prioritization, et cetera. Right now, without having to co-opt some whole new approach or process, but you can pull things in right now that make your life easier next week, and work with the teams at that level to address, those things that are keeping you up at night. And let's take one more similar one. I did see there's a hand up, so I'm going to address that in just a moment, unless that was just identification, yeah, you feel my pain. Let's look at learning. This comes up all the time. I just did already with Bert. We only have so many people that know X, Y, and Z. And worse yet, I shouldn't say worse yet, consider you have a knowledge crisis now of some sort. You don't have enough resources for the things on your plate. I would challenge, do you even see what's coming down the pipe? Do you have a solid product roadmap that you can see what's going to be needed in Q3, Q4 that you could try to solve for? And lots of us don't even have a good roadmap that we can see the tidal wave that's coming. So we got to get better and stronger at this. This is one approach of saying, what can I do? What practices right now can help share that learning, cross-pollinate that expertise, so we don't have just one expert, but we have one expert and 3 really good people in that space. And we have a little bit of fungibility of resources, right? We don't have to stress so much about that. But you got to balance that. As someone said, the speed, demand on your time doesn't go down, right? So we have to balance with project delivery. That pressure keeps up. So you do the figuring out of what patterns can help out balance learning while keeping an eye on deliveries that are still on deck. But we want you guys to figure that out. We talk a bit about coaching. The difference of helping them solve their problems. Maybe sometimes you give them guidance. We look at metrics a little bit, and influence. So one, individual growth, which I like a lot. And then how to influence based on, more than anything, my experience, what I've seen to try to, well, what I like to say is follow me, I'm right behind you, right? But try to manage up, work with leadership. They may not know as much about Agile. When I've done polls, I would say things like, how much does, on a scale of 1 to 10, what does management think their knowledge of Agile is? And it's usually like, it's a 7 or an 8. What do you say management's knowledge of Agile is? It's usually like a 3 or a 4. So they may not know as much. How can we still move towards, true north? There's some ideas of what that could look like for you. So that's at a glance of what's in the class. We'll dive into a couple of these in just a moment, but I wanted to pause. Now that you saw the 30,000 foot view. Any questions, comments, thoughts on what we've gone through so far? Yes, Sunny.
Hey there, Scott. I'm just curious, have you, or do you discuss in the classes, one of the things that we see a lot with the teams is when the pressure, and I don't know if this is part of it, when the pressure starts to build because the delivery needs to happen, they fall back into their old ways, right? It's just like, okay, oh man, we got to get this project out at the end of the year. We're going to abandon Agile for this last sprint because we need to get this out the door and those types of things. Do you guys, touch on that at all?
It's not in the learning objective specifically, but I'll make a quick comment that two things I've seen. Like one, our technical coach says that the developers will go to their secret bag of tricks, which is like dump quality or whatever. So one, I hear that. Two things that when this comes up, I'll just comment really quickly if that's all right with you. And that is, if I'm pressuring the teams to say, hey, how long will this take? And they say 6 weeks. I tell management freaks out. That's too long. Hey guys, you got to, 6 weeks is too long. They come with another estimate, 4 weeks. They yell at me again. It's got to be less than that. Hey team, it's got to be less than 4 weeks. That's still too long. Okay, 2 weeks, but it's a total hack and we got to come back and clean it up later. I just ask you guys, which one does management usually choose? 6 weeks done right, or 2 weeks you got to come back and clean it up later? Come on now. Is it 2 weeks or is it the whole? Yeah, 2. And let me ask you, do we ever come back and clean it up later? No, sir, right? So here's the trick question. I'm sorry to set you guys up. I'm sure you're a wonderful group of people. Rob said you're some of the smartest folks in all of Michigan. But let me ask you this challenging question. Who drew the line on how long it would take? You can put it in chat if you want. That's a safer bet. I don't want to make you be put on the spot. Who drew the line on how long would it take? Oh yeah, you guys already did that. Yeah, the customer did for you, team did. Team management. See, yeah, and this is what we get. We get mixed responses. Lots of times people say management. Now here's the deal. And if you're mad at me after this and you want to drop off the meetup, it's been nice working with you guys. I hope to see you around, right? Because here's the deal. I say the team did, because if I went, let's play it, let's pick it up real quick. Okay, management, 2 weeks. That's too long. Hey guys, it's got to be less than 2 weeks. The customer's coming out here. They'll at some point say, that's all we can do. You're squeezing blood from a stone. There's nothing. That's as fast as we can possibly do it. And I'll go back and tell management, there's nothing they can do. It's as fast. And here's what's going on. Management's like, oh, so that's where the line is. Okay. Because they push and push and push until some point they're like, that's it, right? Now, at the team level, you have a balance of power. I'm fine if the product owner pressures them, because who's the one that protects the team? Scrum Master, right? But I felt this higher level when management's pushing holistically on estimates and things, we don't always get that protection from them. So here's what I would say is, one, the team shouldn't give the 2-week estimate in their minds. And I'll tell them this, don't give me an estimate that's a total hack job. We got to come back with it. Just don't. Just say it's 6 weeks. When they pressure you, saying that's as fast as we can possibly do it with good quality, done right, reusable code, lower total cost of ownership, all that stuff, right? So that's a coaching aspect, and that's a little bit of shift of culture, and you got to pick your spots on this, right? There's going to be some situations where you'll get run over. I get that, but not all the time, right? Where's a foot in the door that you can begin encouraging your team to stand up and say, I hear managers all the time say quality is important. I'm giving you an estimate that reflects that value, that quality is important. So that's one piece of that. On the continuous pressure. The other part of that, Sunny, is coming back and encouraging the relationship between the product owner and the team, that these should be negotiable. That when I come in saying, hey, the customer needs this by whatever. I remember CEO once like, are you going to have this whole web, is a whole website redesign and replatform. You're going to have this by October. He's a mean old New Yorker. And I just, now I'm smarter now. I wouldn't say it this way. So I'm not telling you guys to say it this way, but here's what my response was. I said, well, you'll have something by October. And it'll be in good quality. You'll have visibility every step of the way. You'll be allowed to change your priorities every step along the way. It'll be shippable every step along the way. That's what I promise you, if you give me the right product owner. Now the same CEO completely changed the look and feel twice throughout the project. Let's ignore that, right? But it's kind of the same statement. It's like, I'll give you something by that date. If we work together with the team and the product owner, we can negotiate to say, I can give you 80% of that, right? But I don't think we negotiate very well. And I think the product owner, as I just heard one of my coaches saying, yeah, they're talking to the teams like, do you split the stories up? Yeah. If it can't fit in one sprint, we split it across 2 sprints. Are those separate stores? No, it's one giant store. It takes 4 weeks, but we're splitting it. Like, that's not splitting. Splitting would be like the product owner saying, okay, if that's a 40, what can you give me that's a 20? Great. If that's a 20, what can you give me that's a 13? The product owner paints the target. And the team might be confused. Like, I thought you wanted 17 fields. I can only give you 11. Yes, but those are my most important 11. You'll have something by October, and it'll be my top priority fields in working order, visibility every step along the way, right? Not everything's equally important. So we got to learn to negotiate, and you got to encourage your product owner to come up with options so that if that date pressure is there, we can still play the 80-20 rule and give them, something along the way. And then maybe that allows them also to pivot, et cetera. So those are 2 pieces of it. One's on the quality side, not giving in on that. The other is negotiating for smaller things within that. The devil's in the details. I just don't see it as much as I would like to see it, Sunny, truthfully. All right. That was a bonus question. Okay.
You got one question in chat. I think it's tagged on to what you just
Okay.
mentioned.
Fedora Lind. That's a nice name. Okay. What if we run into a scenario where a deadline has already been promised to stakeholders? So this
happens. It never happens,
I love your hypothetical question. Like, I'm trying to imagine.
Is there a scenario that's not the case? Because that's my question. That's always.
My favorite one is when I went into a company one time, and just so you know, before you train all these teams, you should just know that's the leadership just enforced mandatory overtime. Like, what? Over what? Well, evidently some executive made a bet at a baseball game and lost the bet, so now they have to hit this certain date. And like, that's ridiculous. Anyhow, so asking for a friend. I love that. So 2 things is, one, and this is the tough part, but Scrum's not easy, right? Simple, not easy. I might, a dead Scrum Master is not a good Scrum Master. I might still try to collaborate with them, but what I will do right away is I've got to promise visibility back. Every single sprint review, I'm saying, here's everything you wanted. Here's where the plane's trending down. You can see that the plane's not landing in Detroit. You can see it looks like it's going to go crashing into the Great Lakes, right? What would you like to do? Oh, nothing? Okay. But I'm giving you visibility. I'm giving you the choice. And that is, i.e., I'm holding you accountable for what you want to do now, right? If you take your car in and you're just trying to get your wheels aligned, but they say your brakes are allowed to fail, you would want them to let you know, right? But it's still your choice to say, do I want to do something now? Do I want to wait? It's the same thing with the leadership. I'm letting you know, no, it's not looking good 2 months out from now. What would you like to do? Nothing. Now, you also have to help yourself by broadcasting that everyone knows. That's why it's great when you have lots of management and leadership in the sprint reviews. So the shared accountability, some of that, they might still say, we want to do, cross our fingers and wishful thinking as a strategy. Great. Doesn't look like it's going to work, but okay, I'll keep you updated along the way. So I don't mind that, but I don't think we usually do our due diligence. I can't even. You guys want tough love, or you just want me to be nice and sugarcoat it? I can sugarcoat it. Okay, let's be. So the tough love is that most of these companies, our teams aren't doing release planning. You can't tell me what it looks like over the next 4 to 6 sprints. So we are kind of flying blind, and the leadership kind of gets away with that because we're never able to actually say, it's not realistic. Here's our numbers to prove it and show it. What would you like to do? Nothing. We're living sprint by sprint, and maybe you can tell me what you're doing in a sprint or 2 or 3. Now, some of you are past that, and that's awesome. I love that. I think release planning is a great sign of maturity. But when you're stuck in this situation, I would immediately say, we have to double down and get release planning going, get our estimates solid, do our job, right? Clean up our side of the street first, then put it back on them saying, no, we've been consistently doing most of what we say per sprint. There is no magic pixie dust. It doesn't look likely. It doesn't matter how much you pressure us. It doesn't matter if you bring in bagels and even flavored cream cheese. That still won't do it, right? We can't hit it and then wait and see what they do. But I do think we got to do our part on that first. Right. Yeah, that's the challenge, Bryce. I think it's root cause. Like we have to work on the product side. I don't think product is where it needs to be. I know that's one of Bob's areas of focus and specialty. Product management, I think, is really trending behind on where it could be to help get agility where it needs to be for the business. Yeah, and you're right, Sarah, absolutely takes courage. This is not easy. But once we get there, and I think if we draw the line and we work with leadership and we're still collaborative, we're still respectful, we're not being negative, we're trying to find solutions, then they're like, oh, they're legitimately equal players with us, not order takers. I think a lot of IT is still in this order taker mentality, and we're reactionary, and that's just a really bad combination. It leaves us just treading water all the time, and that's not very successful. Yeah, good for you, Sarah. Yeah, do you want fries with that? Yeah, so would you like the superstars your feature request? Great. We weren't doing anything on the weekends anyways. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit of this. Hopefully give you guys some encouragement and help and some specifics. And I know, Rob, you still want to leave some time at the end just for open Q&A as well. So
yeah. We're doing
Let's
pretty
just
good. We're getting some questions throughout, but yeah, let's see like 10, 15 minutes at the end or so.
okay, then we'll just do a little snapshot, give you guys some kind of value from this, and then we'll dive in to your Q&A. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to two of these parts that we leverage, and partly just because the feedback's really positive. It is a piece of the team's level. I think that type of leadership looks differently, but it's not as much of a pain point as the leadership at the management and senior exec level. Let's take a look at this real quick. What I'm borrowing from is the work of Bill Joyner in his book, Leadership Agility. And what they found was of these 3 levels of leadership. So just at a glance, and I'm going to zoom in so you can kind of see the words along with this and give you guys a chance maybe to play along with this a little bit. So expert leadership, this is the classic thing of they got promoted in the management because they're the smartest one. They got promoted to management because they're the first hire, and then we got more hires. So they're the most tenured person. They've been around the longest. So yeah, they should be the manager. Essentially, they have all the answers. Hey, why is this working that way? Yeah, it's really messed up area of the code. Here's why it's working that way. Hey, where do I find this to solve this problem? Here's where you need, right? They're quick with the answers. Now, they're not the manager because they love working with people. In fact, they'd say, man, if I could just, have these people stop knocking on my door all the time, I could get some real work done. If I could just shut my office door, I could get some things done, right? And a day for them is just filled with answering questions. So it's usually one-on-one. They're more comfortable with that. Very tactical focused, very, very busy, typically overloaded. When I'm working with certain management, I'm like, it looks like your Outlook calendar is you're triple booked, right? Then that's an early indicator, like we've got a problem. You're just overloaded for your expertise. So they might progress from that and move into the blue one, which we call the achiever. So they're looking more like, not that they're answering every question, but they'll tell you who to go talk to, right? They're kind of orchestrating things. They're not necessarily at the tactical level. They're more maybe at the project level. So they can see at a bigger picture. They know the way things get done at your company. So in some ways, it looks really good to the company. Right? These people make things happen. They get results. They drive, the teams, and they play well with others. So the challenge with some of that is, wow, if only we had more of those folks because they're getting so much done. Yes, except that if you look right in the middle, it says my way. It's still about their solution and approach. And let's be honest. Have you ever been at a team meeting or some kind of management meeting and the leaders in there and they say like, okay, let's talk about the approach we're going to use for project X, Y, and Z, whatever. And you're sitting there thinking, why do you even call this meeting? Because you already know what you want, and whatever issues we raise, you'll just push them down until we finally give and say, yes, your approach sounds marvelous, right? It feels collaborative, but it's not really. What they're looking for is to get your buy-in and get you on the bus. And if you have issues and concerns, they're like, you know what? Can we talk about your attitude problem? Like, I'm just raising concerns. It's not an attitude problem, right? But they see it as an attack towards them because that's a great idea they came up with. They're the smartest person in the room, right? So that's the danger of that. You don't feel you can legitimately collaborate with them. This goes back to what Google found, psychological safety. It's not really safe. It's safe to share your opinions about how great their idea is. It's not so safe to share your opinions of what might be flawed in their approach or solutions or ideas, whether that's with the project or how they handle people problems or how they get things done. It wouldn't matter, right? They're not really receptive to feedback and that level. So how can we move beyond that? But before we move beyond that, take a look at the numbers of this. Statistically, those two levels we just looked at, that's the majority of what's out there. And let's be honest, the management you've worked with, how many were probably sitting in those two categories? So it's the lion's share of that. We've got 10% that's at this catalyst leader, but yet if we look at the catalyst leader, this is the stuff I think that we like to see. And some of what I think Scrum actually brings in at the team level as well. Right? Certainly in the top right, this idea of coach, making it safe to learn, like fail fast, learn fast, that kind of environment. We're setting up that kind of environment. The things we're doing are called experiments. Like we don't know, we're just trying these things out. Feedback loops, those are built in at the end of every sprint. Hey, how does everyone feel about how things went, et cetera. High value on collaboration, working together. It's not my work and your work, it's our work as a team. There's only one role, product development team. It's not even dev and QA, it's just team, right? And team goals. So this is some of that shift of an approach that obviously works at the Scrum team level, but I don't think management has been trained in necessarily in that kind of an approach and that style. And I don't even necessarily know if the Scrum Masters have. A classic challenge I've seen is that we typically say, okay, we're going to use Agile. Who are the Scrum Masters? I don't know, grab the project managers. But I think we'd all agree that what makes a project manager successful is very different from what makes a Scrum Master successful. Not saying they can't do it, but I've seen a large percent really struggle with that because the project manager drives teams. Scrum Master is listening to the teams, right? So we continue to see some of those challenges or changes. So maybe the Scrum Master would benefit from that. Maybe certainly the product owner isn't the smartest person in the room, but they're collaborating with the team to figure out what technology, could get us there. What kind of solutions could the team come up? They're open to that. And it's certainly the management level as well. As you're managing your people that are on those teams, it would be good to listen to them, work with them as a coach, et cetera. So we're borrowing some of that as well. I think that that's really valuable. Just real quick in chat, is there anything from that list in green that stands out that you like, right? Is it the we culture? It's about us. It's about the coach. It's about the growth focus of team members. What about purpose and vision? Usually, I think when people in this class are like, oh, this is so refreshing to hear. Yes, I'm so glad someone else says that's important because I've always felt that's important. Yeah, all of it. Thanks, Max. I'm just going to limit it to all of it, if that's okay. Yeah, I love that I might be wrong. Man, that's hard. It's even still hard for me to say, but boy, it opens the door, right? Instead of saying, does anyone see any issues with this? It's the shift to saying, what issues are there with this? Like, I already know I'm not perfect, right? Sometimes I get pushback. I'm like, has anyone made mistakes? Yes. Okay, then. So you're not perfect. You might be missing some things. Love that. Yeah. Safety plus try and fail. Thanks, Maria. Yeah, it's great. Sarah likes the coach, growth, people are assets. Yeah. Don't you love the people are assets? Yeah, Bert, that really does summarize it. Bert, you're right. Yeah. Safe to fail. Thanks, Josh. Good for that. I'm glad you guys see so much in there. Okay. Heinzelman, I'm afraid to pronounce your name, but yes, people are assets too. Good. So lots of good stuff. What we're trying to do is open the eyes of what does that look like and introduce that as a way of working with the teams, because sometimes we're limited by someone who's kind of still micromanaging the team or a manager who's interfering with the teams because he still knows or she still knows what needs to be done, et cetera. All right, we'll take a look at one last piece and then we'll break for the Q&A. And Vihan, did you have a question or are you just raising your hand that you like to think?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So
Sure.
collaboration and self-management are important aspects of Agile, right?
Right.
So how to handle a situation when you have a new team member and, we see sometimes people don't share the knowledge or, don't help the new person, right? So how to handle the situation?
Okay. And you've already tried yelling at them, right? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Don't copy me on that. So now I've seen, by the way, Vihan, I've seen that a lot. I remember one time we had this very large team of teams meeting and someone says, yeah, I'm really stuck on this and could really use some help. And everyone else gives their update. And like, okay, we're done. And I'm like, dude, he was courageous enough to ask for help. And all of you are about to bail on the poor guy, right? So I think some of that is you're still going to model as a leader what that looks like. In this case, like I'm going to stop and say, he asked for help. Who's going to help him? What does that look like? I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to put that on you. Lots of times it's safer for the team to have a working agreement. Most of the change I want to see at the team level is via working agreement. So I'll say, guys, it sounds like you all acknowledge that we have a knowledge silo with Vihan. I'll pick on you since you asked a question with Vihan. But yet, obviously, Vihan's very busy. So, he's not going to be able to necessarily stop. But what we can do is a working agreement. And we'll see working agreements like, we agreed to pair on at least one thing per sprint with Vihan. Now, what that is, the team can still self-manage and self-organize around that. Who's going to pair with Vihan? They can self-manage, self-organize that. So it's dynamic, it's flexible, but it means sprint in, sprint out. Someone's going to pair on something and slowly move the needle. If you keep that up sprint after sprint, you'll be surprised how that is. Or a working agreement, just pairing. You know, we pair on at least one item per sprint, right? And that's going to smooth out the knowledge. Or we mob at least once on one item per sprint on something. So I'm looking for ways that are practices, and that's partly what we're going to talk about in a moment, that they can then say, sounds good. How we're going to implement that, we'll figure that out. Great. But you're kind of coaching and shepherding them towards greener pastures, but not like leading them by the nose there. Just like, hey, does this sound like something you guys want to try out? And again, experiments, the top green one there. Try it out, guys, and then see what you think. And over again, what the teams will say is like, that was great. We're going to modify it and use it this way. That was great, but not all the time. We're going to do it right. So they figured out the application of it, treating it as an experiment versus a mandate of how it's going to work for them. Just some ideas to try out.
Hey, Scott, would you zoom out a little bit
Thank
so
you.
I can get a screenshot of those three? We're talking about values of what we want in good team members, but just the three together, just so we
The
can,
three together.
yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you'll get a
Thank
video of
you.
this.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured I can screenshot it later, but since we're talking.
Sure thing. Okay. Great. All right. Well, I think I'm going to play it safe rather than introduce the next one, but this is the one where I'm liking of, if we know your company's culture, if they're trying to become more innovative, if I was walking through the yellows about we need to be more collaborative, green's about more innovative, more ideas, the blue's about more results, and the red's about more control, more process oriented. Where's your company currently as a map? Where do you need to go for what the marketplace is demanding of you, what the company needs, et cetera? And then we walk through, and actually you guys more and more are doing the research of these yourself as some tools to try out and figure out like, oh, that's what that thing is. I think that helps us become more innovative, gets us more results, gets us more collaboration. So now you're trying out different agile practices as a means of moving the needle culturally to become what you need to become. So one, it's aligned with where you are and where you need to go, and you're just taking a practice and trying that out rather than kind of a willy-nilly or I'm not sure. But I think all of us here can play a significant role in supporting the team with ideas to try out as experiments. But your leadership obligation is like, I'm here to help point the vision. I'm here I care about culture as we're just looking at. I know where we need to be going, right? I can see that. I'm not going to micromanage and tell you what to do, but I'm pointing you ways and providing up ideas of what you could try out to further that progress towards that goal, right? That's the part I think we miss an opportunity. Like we really can help them. It's not just the team thing. Like, I don't know, I'm not the Scrum Master. Who am I to say? Significant aspect of the manager or leader across teams and in the organization, building a capability of the organization at that level. And the Scrum Master just doesn't have the access to some of the people that you might, or they don't feel like they have that kind of authority, et cetera. So you can really be a partner in lots of ways. Obviously, as a Scrum Master can do that better. As a product owner, have ideas for that too. So that's part of what we're looking at, but we won't dive into that just now. At a glance, you get what that kind of might look like. I'm going to pause there and turn up for any questions. Or if there's anything else, Rob, I want to make sure before we wrap up, I don't miss anything else, but you guys have questions in chat as well.
Yeah, well, if you guys have questions, what we could do is sort of raise your hand and I'll call out. And we time box it for an hour. If we stay over for a few minutes, if anybody has to go, we understand, but we'll hang out for a few minutes. And Scott and I are going to be available. We have, a bunch of workshops coming up. The Advanced Scrum Master is definitely going to run at the end of March. Actually, the beginning of March, I take it back. I misspoke. And we'll do a Cal Teams and a Path to Agility workshop as well. Of course, some of you have taken Scott and the Agile Leadership Workshop that Scott and I have done. And we'll do another public version of that. We do a lot of private workshops, but the next public one will be in May. So you have questions, it's, you can raise a hand, or if you want to chat it, I can read it. If you're a little shy, you don't want to. Agile groups typically are not too shy about.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is not a shy group. So that's
yeah, it looks like Josh has got something. So go for it, Josh.
Yeah. So one of the things we have going on in our company is we're bringing in Scrum Masters now who have some industry standard training as opposed to some frameworks that our company has had from their start. And it's working well on a smaller basis. And we have an Agile coach who's awesome and he's engaging the organization at that level. But one of the tricks we're running into is the coach, while he's working at the organizational level, as well as training the scrum masters coming in, the scrum masters working the teams, there's that gap between where the coach is working and where the scrum master is working with the team down. And then you've got the project managers who've been in, like you said, the 40-year-old ways of thinking and running projects. So I say all that to say, for these classes, especially for our scrum masters coming in, if there was a right set of these Cal courses that we could take to be able to not only talk with the teams and build them up the way we need to, but then turn and engage leadership above the teams so that they see it, but they don't really care about the technical side of implementations of Scrum. What classes of these three do you recommend? All of them or some part?
Yeah, I'm going to switch back to these just so we're looking at the same thing here. And I don't normally say this, but what I'm seeing is more and more people taking all three, and here's why. One is we all grow as leaders. I think the Cal Essentials is just something that really, I think everyone should take. Cal Teams, because just so you said, there's definitely team application aspects of how can we just get these, the right practices, help the teams grow the way they can, high performing, et cetera. But without the Cal O, we miss the setting of expectations and the why behind the saying, in some ways, the culture change comes from leaders, and the leaders need to be bought into saying, we know we need to change, and here's why we need to change. It's a compelling vision, but we give you the tools that if they're not there, how do you work with them in a way that you can kind of tease that out, and what ways can you shape them to get them there? You will now have the roadmap from Cal O. And it's a roadmap that not only is culturally, but we've added something recently, Path to Agility, where you can look at the business's goals to make sure we're aligned, and very accessible tools for them to get, like, well, here's what we expect from Agile. So I feel like it gives you kind of the insider's box of like, here's what we need to be doing at the leadership level. It'll make sense. And then you can kind of essentially coach and influence them if they're not there now to get them there and move them there. And that's why I would say take all three, because you're going to have the core stuff, but then you have tops down, bottoms up. If you guys care about agility, if you care about the agile transformation of your company, I think you have to do those two together of Cal O and Cal Team, so it's tops down, bottoms up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my encouragement. It's 3 days, which, I don't think compared to the CSM being 2 days, I think there's a ton of value in what those 3 separate days offer.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that one, Josh. The coach that you're referring to, I know at your company, he actually took the Cal E&O equivalent. He was in one of the original Cal 1 workshops with us when Pete taught the workshop. And so I'm not going to mention his name, but your leader, coach over there, and I have been talking about ways to help the organization, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. No, I don't think you'd be disappointed in what's in there. Great.
Sunny's out there. Go.
Yeah, Megs, it is 3 days because they're each 1 day. But you can kind of see I'm mentioning other things. There's some nice overlap of them. You could take them separately. I just think of the power of all of them together is really nice.
Yeah, and actually, when I do the classes with Pete or Scott or anybody else, I typically bundle them, the E and the O together, because that really maps to the Cal 1, the way it was originally from. There's a whole background as to why they broke it out, which I can answer questions that people really want to know, but the E and the O together are great starting points.
Yep. Sunny, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, more of a comment for Josh, and we had all of our business team, or as much of our business team, take the Cal E, Cal O class, and it wasn't until they sat in those classes were we able to make major strides in becoming, more agile and kind of getting them to understand the why behind what we're trying to do and how much their decisions is actually impacting our ability to do this. So I highly recommend, like what Scott and Rob were saying, is that it's not those classes are definitely not just for the Scrum Masters and people in the Scrum teams, but we're talking our CTO took this class, everyone within the business management team, product owners, our client relationship managers. We kind of brought everybody together and said, okay, we've been struggling for so long. We needed something to kind of get everybody thinking the same way and on the same page. And when that happened, lots of light bulbs started turning on and people started realizing that, oh, this is what we need to do to make the change. And we're definitely continuing to improve, but that was the, the catalyst, if you will, that allowed the conversations to start happening and better conversations. So
that's great input, Sonny. And I'll make one last comment. I realize we're almost at the top of the hour and I want to be respectful, but there's a client that had gone to the Cal E&O and they loved it. And they're kind of, their leadership team took it. And then they said, this is super, but let's do the E and the T for all the teams, all the management level that's working with these teams. And that's fabulous. But this last couple of classes, and we're about to sync up with her, and they have a new transformation officer and they got to figure some things out. So we're going to talk on Friday. But the challenge is I'm saying, look, immediately these people are like, but what's the vision of the transformation? But what are we allowed to do or not allowed to do? All these questions that were immediately pointed up because they're not doing the O, they're just doing team level down, and you've almost kind of cut it off. So it's almost like a little bit of frustration, like this is all great, but we're not collaborating and working with them, and we don't have that tools that they got to figure that out. So with a little bit of conversation, I think they're all three are good. And maybe, just maybe, you look at your agile journey right now, and do you have a roadmap for that? And maybe that's a good conversation to have too. Like, what does it look like in 2022? Right? All the teams are like scrumming it up, but we know there's a lot more to go. What are those areas that we would love to talk to in general? If you're wanting to do more with agility, management leadership should be interested in hearing what that would look like and maybe co-create that with you, but just an idea to put out there. And thanks, Sonny, for sharing that story. I think that's a really powerful story. I appreciate that.
And Scott and I did not pay him to say that. So.
Yeah. Let me Venmo you right now, Sonny. Sonny's got a great story. I love what I'm hearing happening there.
Any other questions you guys have? We've got a minute or two. Any chat questions? Anyways, I'll hang out for a few. Is that?
Sorry, this is Megan.
Right.
I have a question, but I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to Teams instead of Zoom. So I am curious, Scott or Rob, if you have like a nice little one sheet that I can just hand over to my manager and say, here's justification to spend my entire training budget for this year on this. Do you have something like that?
I have more documentation than I probably need. I'd have like a 30-page document, but I'll make sure I get you the information. One on my website has a really good, I'll put that in chat in a minute. It's a pretty good description of the Cal E and the O. And I have some other stuff I can email. If you want to email me as well, we'll take it offline.
Sounds great.
The longer answer than you probably wanted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's interesting.
Yeah. Anybody else? We've got some time. All right. So I'm going to put in chat what Megan just asked me about so you can look at it. And otherwise, I'd say thanks, guys, for joining. And I'm going to stop the recording. If you have any questions, you got my email, my mobile phone number. I've emailed it to all of you. You know, the MichiganAgileTraining.com. You can reach me. And I'm going to hit end the record, and you guys can swoop around and ask a few questions if you want.
Thanks, Danielle.